The ghost does not live in this house. Oh no, I was wrong. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. When my son, Aaron, was only 9, he was struck by a box truck while riding his bike. It wasn't the driver's fault, and I have never seen a man so sorry in my entire life. Aaron had fallen over at the wrong time and ended up in the path of the vehicle. Still, a boy getting hit by a truck going 25 miles per hour isn't a great thing. The accident caused a brain bleed that permanently damaged my boy, and he spent weeks in the hospital. It was the scariest thing of my life, and my wife and I rarely slept during that period. Aaron pulled through but suffered some minor brain damage. Nothing extremely bad. He can talk, walk and enjoy life, which is the most important thing, but he occasionally has seizures, has a few minor speech problems, and his mind wanders more than it did before. His recovery was a breath of fresh air, and a weight lifted off our shoulders. The doctors didn't seem either pessimistic nor optimistic during the stay, and we were constantly left wondering what was going to be left of the bright boy that loved to draw. During his stay, he would constantly credit a man named William for his recovery. The doctor, nurses and the physical therapist had no idea who he was talking about, and we thought perhaps he got the name of one of the staff confused. The doctor's name was Westing, and there was a nurse Willard as well. It wasn't until later in his stay that he roughly described William as an older man, dark hair that was thicker on the sides and always wearing a hospital gown. Despite the staff not knowing who he was talking about, we assumed it was probably a patient on the same floor that would bump into him on occasion. Aaron came home after his recovery and immediately seemed different. This was to be expected. Changes in personality, attention issues, and even speech disturbances were forewarned. Those things were occasionally present, and minor, but what concerned us was his activity in his bedroom. Late at night, we would sometimes hear Aaron whispering, laughing and even arguing. He is an only child and it is just the 3 of us, so we had no idea what was going on and became a little concerned that he was talking to himself in his room so late at night. We brought it up with his doctor on numerous occasions, and he said that while it isn't extremely common for someone to hallucinate, it could be a combination of the effects, healing process and the imagination of a child. We chose to ignore the behavior, assuming it would eventually slow. It didn't. It increased over the next month. Aaron sitting in his room until 1, 2, even 3 in the morning talking. Even more worrying, the laughter and whispering were being replaced with arguing and crying. We tried to talk to Aaron about it, and it was obvious his mood would change, visibly change. If we asked him who he was talking to, or arguing with, the night before he would shut down and get teary-eyed. Even though it was obviously bothering him, his response would always be nobody or I'm not. Just asking would sometimes sour his mood for the entire day, and so we tried to walk on eggshells regarding it. This behavior went on even longer, Aaron talking to someone late at night and trying to ignore it during the day. The arguments, however, began to become clearer. My wife, on numerous occasions, heard Aaron yelling for the mystery friend to leave him alone or go back. It was on one occasion that we both heard him say, "I didn't ask you to come home with me," that we started to piece things together. The morning after we heard Aaron yelling, loudly, about not asking his imaginary friend to follow him was the morning we all 3 sat down and heavily talked about it. My wife, the cooler and calmer of the 2 of us, started a very delicate conversation. "Why don't you draw any more, honey?" she asked. We had noticed that Aaron's favorite hobby, drawing, had ceased. "I don't want to," he said, and he looked so sad and lost at that moment. I inquired why. We theorized prior to this that perhaps he had a hard time with the hand coordination, but we now felt that it may have to do with his sleepless nights. I don't like what I draw, he said, and then he began to cry a little. Does the person you yell at not like your drawings? My wife thought we had it all figured out, but we came to find out we didn't. No, he doesn't want me to draw him and I want to. Now I don't. His tears were slowing and it was obvious he had something to tell us. Before he could, I made the $1 million accusation. William, I said, pretending I knew the answer even though I wasn't sure. William was nice at the hospital. He started to look a little pale as he began spilling the beans, and repeatedly dropped to a whisper while talking. I wanted to draw him when we got home, but he didn't want me to. Then he started getting mad about things I was doing, so I kicked him out. He paused and my wife wrapped her arm around him and told him to go on. So he only stands outside my window now. He stares in and is really mad and yells at me through the window at night. He doesn't look the same now. I slid my son my tablet and stylus and told him to draw. Usually, his art would be cars, houses, cartoons and occasionally a superhero he would think up. He was always very talented when it came to drawing, had his own style. He began drawing as he slowly talked. I think he is a ghost, Dad. I know you say they aren't real, but I really think he is a ghost. I wanted to tell him that ghosts aren't real. To tell him that maybe his head injury had caused him to imagine something that wasn't there, but I wasn't sure. He finished drawing after a minute and what he drew scared the hell out of both my wife and me. We tried to hide it from Aaron. I saved the art. Is this him at the hospital? I already knew that this wasn't, it was after they came home. After Aaron pissed him off. No, that is him outside the window. His mouth gets really big and he doesn't have eyes anymore. Like he pretended to have eyes or can take them out. Did he tell you he was a ghost at the hospital? My wife was balancing how we should approach this. I had honestly given up on trying to figure it out. No. He said he was from the room next door. He would come by at night and tell me stories and tell me to get better. Aaron was breaking down at this point and we thought this was a good point to stop the third degree. You aren't in trouble, son. Do you want to sleep in our room tonight? I didn't want him in his room anymore. Aaron sprung up happier and asked if we could watch Netflix on the television, and we agreed. After the conversation, my wife called the doctor and I went and played on the PlayStation with my son for a bit to take his mind off of it. My wife eventually got a hold of him and had a long conversation. When she was done, we went into the dining room and talked about it. The doctor didn't think that this was normal, but couldn't say for sure if it was a side effect of the accident, something to do with the seizures, which we hadn't witnessed since he was in the hospital, or him manifesting an emotional issue as a ghostly man. My wife asked for him to see if William had ever been in the room next to Aaron and died, but the doctor flat out told us that even if he could find that out he wouldn't be able to tell us. He did seem certain that there was no ghost or demon, and it comforted us. Why? Because we didn't want to believe. Aaron slept in our room that night and didn't get up and whisper, talk, laugh or argue the entire time. He slept. This was bittersweet. On one hand, our son had a night without odd behavior. On the other hand, it seemed frightening that the strange behavior would only manifest when he was alone. Almost a validity to what he said. We continued with him sleeping in our room for a week straight, and not one night did he act strange. He watched television and he slept soundly. This meant that we were going to have to do a test that no parent wants to do. We had to put Aaron back in his room for a night and risk him seeing whatever William was again. It was 11 at night and my wife and I were waiting. Just waiting. Occasionally one of us would stand next to Aaron's bedroom door and listen for anything abnormal. We had put him to bed, and he was reluctant, at 9 and he was sound asleep. Between the two of us, we had no idea when his episodes would actually start. It would always be a one of us got up to piss, get a drink or couldn't sleep type thing. So wait we did. Midnight came and went, and judging by the fact I am detailing the hours where everything was fine, you can guess that 1 hour things weren't quiet. I will skip 1 in the morning and go straight to a little after 2. A creak from the room, possibly him shifting around, but it was shortly followed by loud little kid whispering. And I wasn't going to give it a chance to go back to arguing, so I burst the door open. Across from the door, Aaron, in his Spider-Man pajamas, was standing at the window. No face on the other side, but he quickly turned around and I could tell the boy was angry. He came back and wanted in, Aaron said, angrier than scared. I told him no and he got mad. He was about to start yelling when he stopped and turned around to the window. I said my son's name. No one was there at the window and I thought that maybe he was still seeing him. He is hiding, Aaron said, not taking his eyes off the window. He is hiding out there waiting for you to leave. Dad mode turned on, and if something was really bugging my son I was going to handle it. If it was my boy's mind causing it, I was going to put on a show. I walked to the window and opened it, held my head out and began yelling for him not to come back. Then my wife screamed. I turned and yelled, "It is just me yelling at him, he came back." I had obviously startled my wife and wanted to comfort her. She rounded the corner of the hall to Aaron's door and reached in and grabbed me, pulling me away from the room. She looked scared to death and I felt pretty bad for the spur of the moment performance. When we got far enough away and I could tell she was still very frightened, I realized it was something else. What she told me is bringing tears to my eyes as I write this. While you were yelling out the window, I heard a man's voice from outside say, "I'll be back," Aaron, from outside the wall. I ran outside as she ran back to Aaron's room, ready to kick the head in of whoever was stalking my son, but no one was there. No man nor ghost, no car and no noises of someone running off. After I checked the house, we put Aaron in our bed and we stayed in the hall and talked. My wife told me it sounded like a loud angry whisper, no so much someone yelling back. Aaron has been in our room for over a month now, and he sleeps perfectly fine. I tried to research the name William for sex offenders in my area and around the hospital, nothing. Can't find anyone that matches the description either. My wife fully believes that something followed our son home from the hospital and I am inclined to agree. We try not to leave him alone much, in case William comes back. Our son still doesn't draw, which is very sad, but we can understand. The whole ordeal has been a lot for him and he handled it well, but he is too afraid to draw. We don't know exactly what William said to make him so afraid of doing it, and he won't tell us. Our guess is that William made some mighty big threats, which makes whatever or whomever this is dangerous. I still have the drawing he did of William and I absolutely hate looking at the picture. It is a shame. We think our son is talented for his age and maybe one day he can leave this all behind him.